Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our System Admin Walkthrough webinar. My name is Holly and I'm one of the Kelvin Customer Success Managers. I'm going to be leading the webinar today along with my fellow CSM, Justin. You'll also meet Ari, who leads our education team at Kelvin. He's going to go ahead and open us up with a quick check-in. So let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. It is really fantastic to see everyone here today. We're really excited for the system admin walkthrough. And since many of us are the system admins using Kelvin, we'd love to hear from you is what is one thing you want to use Kelvin for in this upcoming year? Okay? We want to understand what you're doing because this kind of creates fantastic ideas and a fantastic space for all of us to think about. So you can share in the chat, what is one thing you want to use Kelvin for in the upcoming year? As the Kelvin team, we are heavily promoting adult social and emotional learning. That's something that we're trying to put a spotlight on for the rest of the year. But let us know in the chat, what is one thing you want to use Kelvin for in the upcoming year? Do you have any specific goal with Kelvin that you want to put in, you want to tell us about? And yeah, let's share. So we've got some answers coming in. Thank you so much, Chris and Jeremy. I want to support schools in supporting students. I would like to use Kelvin to identify gaps in social emotional learning. Yeah, use that to inform next steps of SEL. And these are fantastic ideas. I think it can be so difficult sometimes to get those next steps in, and this is really why we want that data. So feel free to continue sharing. Thank you, Jennifer. We'll be using Kelvin to enhance student voice and support WASC. That is really fantastic. So keep those coming in. We want to hear from you. We want to give ideas to our community. So feel free to carry on sharing those as we go along. But thank you everyone for sharing. Let's see, we've got a couple more coming in from Heather, parent, staff, and student pulses, but we need to select a different battery of questions with more impact from the community. Exactly, community input is fantastic. We're going to collect student data to inform the past on how we support students in SEL. Fantastic, we've got some really wonderful ideas over here in terms of how you're going to be using Kelvin. And we see a lot in the world of SEL, focusing on students, focusing on the adults in our school, some focusing on families, and using Kelvin to collect data, informs our needs, guide teachers and admin on SEL from the results of data. These are fantastic ways, and this really is such wonderful feedback to us, the Kelvin team. We love to learn what you are speaking about and what you are doing. So thank you, everyone. You can keep those coming in. I'm going to pass back to Holly right now. It was fantastic checking in with you all. Enjoy the webinar, and feel free to post anything on the chat. We're here to answer any questions and be here to support you in your Kelvin journey.
Thank you, Ari, and thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts about what you're thinking about using Kelvin for in the coming year. So one of our goals with today's webinar is going to be a little bit more technical, and we're hoping that we'll leave you with a better understanding of the reports and settings available to you as a system admin. So whether you're new to Kelvin or you've been with us for a few years, we think you're going to learn something new to help you manage your Pulse site. So today we will cover the user roles in Kelvin, how to manage users and the system. We'll also cover some Launchpad features that are only available to system admins, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat along the way, and Justin and Ari, they're going to help me gather them so we can address them at that time at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so before we can talk about the tools and reports available to system admins, we wanted to take a moment to explain the various user roles in your Kelvin site. You'll see a list here of these user roles, and if you've been with us for a couple of years or maybe even a few months, you probably recognize system admins, district admins, school admins, teachers, and students. But let's take a moment to define each of those roles, starting with the system admins. So system admins have the highest level of access, and they can change user roles and permissions. This should technically only be a small handful of people at your district. Typically, it's going to be your project owner or someone with decision-making rights. It could also include your tech leads or IT support, folks that manage your SIS data and might be able to help you troubleshoot user issues within your Kelvin system or within your data management. Next, we have district admins, and they can see district-wide data, so across any of the schools affiliated with your district, but they're not going to be able to change user roles and permissions like the system admin can. And this role is most applicable or appropriate for directors, superintendents, assistant superintendents, and in some cases, the district admin might also be a system admin, although that's not always the case. So let's look at school admins. So school admins, or we might even call these school staff as they're imported, can see school-wide data for their site. And this role is most appropriate for principals, assistant principals, counselors, or other admins at your site that are non-instructional. And they can also be affiliated to multiple sites or schools. So if you have a counselor or social worker that services multiple schools in your district, we can help you set them up at different sites as well. Next, we have teachers. So teachers can see data for students that are enrolled to them only. They also do not have access to edit or update user roles in the system or any permissions. And if you grant them permission, they can create pulses for those students that are enrolled to them only. Okay, last but not least, we have the user role of students. Now, students don't see a launchpad like a staff or system admin user would see. And typically, students' interaction with Pulse is through the extension or that pop-up, which is Boogie the dog. But if they did happen to find pulse.kelvin.education or they're directed there intentionally, they will not see the launchpad. They'll see something like the next screen here. They'll get prompted to sign in with Google, which should be using their school email address. And then if they successfully sign in with their school email, they'll get one of two options. So they'll see the first option, hi there, your school wants to hear from you. So this is about the same as what they would see if they clicked on Boogie the dog. And that's if an open pulse is live and they're a participant, they can start taking that pulse. Or they'll get a message saying that they're all finished, which means they've already taken the pulse and submitted responses, or there are no live pulses for which they are a participant. So most users in Kelvin will be and should be imported from your student information system each night. And this will automatically create accounts for most school admins, teachers, and it's how we import your enrollment, rostering, and sometimes subgroups or programs like ELL, SPED, free reduced lunch. But there may be times that you want to add an admin account for folks who are not being imported. So a common case for this might be a site admin like a principal or a counselor. And we want to show you how you can do that and manage your users in the system. So how do you go about doing that? First, we're going to need to go to your Pulse site. So let's go ahead and click over into our demo site here. And once you're in your Pulse Launchpad, that's at pulse.kelvin.education, you're going to click on this avatar at the top right corner and then click into the settings link. So this settings link will give you your settings page where most of your permissions and settings and reports that only system admins can see. You'll notice at the top here, we have a list of system admins for this site. It'll vary by your site or district, depending on how you've set that up. Below, you'll see a group of links and permission settings that you'll have access to as a system admin. And then below that, on the bottom, you'll notice this manage your personal notifications. So you can either check or uncheck to receive Pulse email reminders before a scheduled Pulse, getting Pulse email reports after a Pulse has closed, and then also to be notified when students request assistance, which is one of our special configurations for student Pulses. But for now, we wanted to show you how to add a new admin user. So let's come back up to the top. You'll notice this link here, manage users. I'm going to go ahead and click here to add an admin that hasn't been imported. So for this example, let's say I have a new principal at Boogie Middle School. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is check to see if that person is being imported. And the best way to do that in this search bar right here at the top, I would throw in their admin email, their school email that they'll be using. And I hit that enter button and notice that this user, it does not exist, has not been imported. I could also search by a first name, and I notice that's not the user I'm looking for. So I can go ahead and add them by clicking this plus new admin user button at the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this user's details in here, paste in their email. I'm going to show that they are a principal. And what's really important in this roles is to make sure that you designate the appropriate role for that user. I had mentioned that this is a new principal for Boogie Middle School, so I am going to select from the dropdown school staff at Boogie Middle. I had mentioned earlier, you can assign staff users to multiple sites if you'd like, but this is just the principal at Boogie Middle School, so that's the only site I'm going to select, which will give that person access to all user data at their own site. You'll notice this import from Clever is unchecked. If it was checked, that would be if we were importing either from your SIS through Clever or an Aries direct API. And we also can import your data using an SFTP site. So you're going to leave that unchecked because we're adding them manually. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And one thing to note when you manually add an admin user is that you also need to manage them manually. So if they leave that school or they leave your district, you'll need to come back and deactivate them. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for Jack, who I just added. You'll notice this unlink button or icon next to it shows me that they're not being imported in. If I click on Jack, I can come up here at the top, ... and click deactivate. Let's just say that this user took a long, maybe a 6-month leave of absence, a personal leave, and I just want to deactivate them for that time. I can come back and reactivate them after the 6 months. And you'll notice this red field here that tells me to reactivate. So it's very simple to manually manage. However, we want to make sure that most of your users are being imported so that we're getting the most up-to-date information, especially if you have a large district. It can be pretty onerous to be manually managing multiple users at different sites. So that's pretty straightforward how you'll add your admin user, but there's also times that you need to create a custom group for either staff or students. So we're going to show you next how to create your custom groups. Let's see some use cases. I'm going to come back to our settings and take us back to our settings page where you see the links. So you'll notice we just did the manage users. We're going to go into manage groups. And you're going to see a lot of different groups here. The ones that have a lock displayed on them are already being imported or they're set up in our system, so you cannot edit those. But you'll notice that we have ones with no lock. So this advisory teachers, at risk, which would be students. So these are staff and student custom groups. So let's say that we want to send out a pulse to all school staff and teachers in the district, but I only want to share the results with the district admins and the principals at each participating school. And I don't have a principal group set up for the schools that I want to share with, so I'm going to go ahead and create one. You'll see this plus new group button at the top. And you'll notice the dropdown gives you either a student group or a staff group. So we're going to create our staff group. And then you're going to go ahead and name your group. So I'm going to call my group School Principals. And I'm just going to give a description to let me know these are the middle school principals. And click save. You could change the color if you want. I'm just going to leave the default. And now I can add my staff. Well, I just added Jack to my admin users. So if I paste in his email again, I can find Jack easily and add Jack to this list. I can add other users as well. So let's just say I have these 3 principals that I want to add to our middle school principals group. You can always come back to this group and remove a user or add more by clicking the Add Staff button here. I can also rename the group, edit the name later if I need to. So now I've added them. I want to show you for the use case of just sharing results with this group of middle school principals. So I'm going over to one of my edit Pulse settings. So if you're used to using Pulse, you'll be familiar with this page as you're creating a Pulse. If you wanted to come back and edit, you can do that. But on this info page, you have this, who do you want to share results with? And I mentioned earlier, I just want to share with district admins and not teachers. Maybe I want to just add my school principals. Oops, let me refresh so it gets my new group in here. There it is. Now I see my school principals with 3 principals in there. I've added them from the drop down, and then I can save my changes. So now they'll be able to receive results as well as district admins. So going back to settings, we've covered how to create a new admin user and also how to create a custom group. So once again, the custom group use cases are typically if you want to deliver surveys to a select group of people, or you want to share those results with select groups of staff. Now that we've covered that, I want to take you through some of the permission settings. You'll see this link right here next to our users and groups. It's called permissions. And let's go back to that link. Now from this permissions page, you're going to be able to adjust which users can see students' timelines, receive requests to speak to an adult, and then who should have Pulse creation access. So you'll notice here right now we have it set up to principals and school counselors, as well as system admin will see student timeline and requests, and also will receive those notifications to speak to an adult. Sometimes you'll want to create a custom group that will receive those requests to speak to an adult. So we may have a group in here called request responders. I can add them in to receive those requests and view the timeline. Creating Pulse surveys. You'll notice I have custom groups here, principals and school counselors, a survey author. If I added teachers, then they can create surveys for their own students that are rostered to them. And then finally, this limited access, educators will not be allowed to see personal personal identifiable information. So I'm going to show you the difference of what that would look like if I put someone in limited access versus what I see right now as a system admin. So if I'm a system admin that sees the student timeline and requests, let me just click over to the Launchpad, and you'll notice, oops, go back. You'll notice on the Launchpad, these cards here at the top. So I have the ability to create a student pulse. I have a students card, which lets me see all of the students that are enrolled or rostered over from the student information system. And then this request card, that would be any request to speak to adult would come through and pop up on here. Let me go back and show you what it looks like if I were to take away the timeline and request for a system admin and limit access for me. Let me save that. And we're going to come back to our Launchpad. Let me refresh for you. Now you'll see there's only a create a pulse option because I'm a system admin. I can still create a student pulse, but I don't see the student timeline or the request to speak to an adult. Let me go ahead and change that back for us so we can show you a couple more things over there. Okay, let me come back and refresh. Okay, so you can see how that will change the view, and then keep in mind that each user's role, depending on the way you've set up permissions or who is rostered to them, they may have a different view than the system admin. So system admins will typically see all of these cards that appear here unless you were to remove access for a system admin. So at this point, let me go ahead and hand it over to Justin. He's going to show you some reports that you can use to check your data and troubleshoot your extension. And then we're going to come back after that and visit some of these settings in the Launchpad itself and things that you can do as a system admin. All right, Justin, take it away.
All right, well, thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can everybody see my screen? So what I want to show you is just a few reports that we have that as a system admin, you can kind of go through and check your data. So there's a number of reports that you can get to. So as Holly mentioned before, in the upper right-hand corner, when you click on your initial here, so I'm in as Eliza, and if I were to click on that initial, I see where it says settings and where I can sign out. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this settings icon right here. And then that's going to take me to a screen that looks like this, where I could manage users, groups, permissions, as Holly was showing you before. But then there's this group of reports right here. So within these reports, let's say you just started using Kelvin and you want to check your data, or you just rolled over your data and you want to make sure that all your data is correct. So what you could do is you can click on this organizational summary report. And if I were to click on this report right here where it says organization summary, that's going to take me to a screen where it's going to give me just that overall count. So in my organization, I have 6 schools. And if I scroll down a little bit more, I have 2,400 students. And then enrollments, it should correlate to your number of students. And then if I scroll down a little bit more, it just gives you more summary data. So this just will kind of give you an overall idea of, am I getting the right number of students that are imported? So this is one place that you can check. And if you're importing contact information, then you're going to see it show up as family member summary. So these are just summary reports that show you overall numbers to kind of just compare to your SIS. Now I'm going to go back here. I can go back by just clicking on this settings breadcrumb at the top. And so that's going to take me back to this screen. And once again, I can always get there by clicking on the upper right-hand corner and clicking on settings. So that's the organization summary report. We also have the browse data report. So this is one, especially as a data person, if you are going in and you want to check your specific import data, if you click on this browse data report, you're going to see a screen that looks like this, and you can see where it says browse data, and you'll see a little toggle here that you can choose. So for example, I want to see, okay, I just imported and I want to make sure I have the right number of schools. So if I were to click on schools, here's my summary. So it has my school name listed on the left, the number of teachers, the number of sections, and the number of students associated with each school. So if you're not seeing your school there, you can see, okay, where is my school? Or you can actually click in here and search for a specific school. For example, if I type in Boogie, same goes for any of these other fields. You can search, and to clear that out, you just get rid of that, hit enter, and they come back. So that's going to be the same for schools, but let's say you want to look at specific students, right? So let's say you're checking your imports and you notice that there's a student that's not in Kelvin. So you can come to the student tab here and look for your specific students. So it's going to give you a list of all of your students. It's going to give you a results summary here. I have 2,430 students. So I can check that against my student information system. And then I can also search for a specific student. So for example, let's say I'm looking for Abby Gibson. I can just come in here, type in Abby, and I see that there's 2 Abbys that come up here. And here's Abby Gibson. So this is where you can go in and you can just do a quick check to see if there are specific students that are not being imported. And if you don't see them here, then you know to go back and check your data that's being imported. So again, you can also search by user and do the same thing. Or if you're importing your contacts, you can search for specific family members. And once again, you can search by the student name or the family member or by email or phone number. So I'm going to go back to show you just a couple more reports. So this was the browse data report. So if I click on the settings, I'm going to go back. And if I scroll down a little bit more, I'll notice here there is these other set of reports having to do with the Chrome extension. So there's two kind of data things in Kelvin. One is the data import from your SIS, whether you're syncing from Clever or directly or a flat file. Then there's the Chrome extension, and that's Boogie that shows up, the little dog that shows up in the bottom right corner of your screen. That is the extension. So if you want to make sure that the extension is working, one thing you could do is after you install the extension and you go through those steps of installing the extension, you can check to see if it's working here. So we have this nice little report called the extension summary. I'm going to go ahead and click on this report here. So you can either run it for students or staff if you installed it for staff. So those are like your OUs in as a Google admin when you go in and install it. And so if you share that plugin, or if you share the extension, it'll show up here like in the upper right hand corner. You can click on the little puzzle. You can also get to it that way. Pulse by Kelvin. So once that's been installed, I can now run this report in Kelvin, and I can see, okay, in the last 60 days, have students seen the have they seen Boogie? So I could see at Boogie Middle, 313 have seen it, 152 have not seen it. So about 33% of my students in the last 60 days have not seen Boogie. Now, it could be that they're just not logging into their Chromebook, or it could also be indicative of a larger issue that they're not seeing the extension. Maybe they're being blocked. So you're looking for these numbers, and you could see these are basically percentages, right? So 33% is missing, 65% is missing here, 49%. But if I go down here, only about almost 50% are missing. And if I scroll down a little bit more, it gives me a summary of which domains are being recognized in the data. So for example, if I see that, this example.com, we don't use that, and I see that that's a large number, that might be a red flag for me to go back and check to make sure that I have the right domain that I'm sharing with. So again, this is just an overall summary for the extension. And if I go back to settings again, we have just a couple more reports having to do with the extension. So for example, let's say I notice that there's a lot of students missing at Boogie Middle, and I'm looking for a specific student who's reporting to their teacher, hey, I'm not seeing Boogie. You can actually come in here to the extension details report, run that again for students, and I can search for that specific name. So let's say, I'm looking for Jewel. Okay, I see that Jewel is there. But let's say there's another student that I'm not seeing, or that is saying that they're not seeing the survey. We could see that, yes, Jewel is seeing the survey. If I click in here and I type in the word no, I see that there's 1,090 students that are not seeing the extension, and here is my list of students. So now I have a nice list of students of everyone who's not seeing the extension, and then from there I can kind of go back and I can check some other things in my Google admin to make sure that those students have been included in that group. So again, that's the extension details. And then last but not least, the mystery email report. These are all related to one another. If we were to click on that, and again, you can run it for students or staff. And in this case, I don't have any mystery emails for students or staff. But if there was an email that was not recognized that we're seeing, that would show up here. And then you'd be, oh, okay, that's why that teacher's not seeing it, because I see it says, Mr. Garcia's personal email is showing up here. So I'm going to go back to my settings. And so these are all of the kind of reports that having to do with either your data or the extension. And one more report is the internal launchpad. So this is nice if you are actively about to send a pulse, or you recently sent out a pulse. So for you as a system admin, this is very helpful, because if you want to keep track of all of the pulses that are live out there, because if you gave access to counselors to create surveys and those are being put out there, if you click on this internal launchpad, it's going to list all of your upcoming surveys and your recent surveys that have recently posted or closed. And so from here, you can see when it starts and when it's going to end, and anything that's ongoing, you're going to see in this list. I only have one that's upcoming. And then from here, which is nice, I can actually click on that link and it will take me to the survey itself and I could manage it from there. So I'm just going to go back here. So these are just kind of a summary of some of the different reports. And I'm going to throw it back to Holly to kind of talk a little bit more about the Launchpad.
Thank you, Justin. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and take us back to the Launchpad, or what we would call your landing page. All right, so here we are. We are back at our Launchpad, and I wanted to take you through some of the features that you as a system admin will be able to configure in the system. So as I demonstrated earlier in the permissions settings link, unless you remove the system admin's group within those permissions, you should be seeing these cards here at the top. Now, as a system admin, if you have any pulses that you've pushed out through your district, you would see those results as cards down below as well. But I want to talk about these cards at the top because these are specific to permissions. So I mentioned earlier this create a pulse card. This is going to default to creating a student pulse. You do have access to create pulses for your staff and families. I'll show you really quickly here by clicking the pulses link at the very top center. And you'll see this new pulse and then a drop down for students, family, and staff. So district admins, if you've given them permission to create pulses, they'll be able to create student, family, and staff pulses. For a site admin, they would be able to create pulses for their site as well. And then teachers would just have access to student pulses for students that are rostered to them. Now I'm coming back to our Launchpad to cover those cards again and some of the permissions and settings. You'll see this middle card, which is students card. And from here, we can look at students' timelines. So you'll see each student, what school they're affiliated with, and the grade level. We can also, if I click on an individual student, so I'm going to click on Diana, I can see their timeline that shows any of their student requests, resolutions from the staff member that resolved it, and any of their notes. You can collaborate with colleagues, or you can make the comment private if you wanted to leave a comment. Keep in mind, students do not see comments that are left here. This is just for staff that have access to the student timeline and requests. And you can, again, configure your own custom group of staff that should be receiving or have access to that. So you can really limit it to a small group of staff that should be attending to those requests. Now, if I click on another student name, I'm going to go ahead and go click back at that students link, which takes me back to that list from the card. And let's say Kathy is no longer going to be participating in any pulses. Their family doesn't want them having any surveys. I can click the ... at the top right corner of Kathy's name, and you'll see an opt out from pulses, and I can opt them out. Well, let's just say that it was for only one pulse or one survey that the family members did not want Kathy to participate. You could come back and find that student. And let me just rephrase that. I'm on the student page, this top left drop down. I can find opted out students, and you'll see Kathy here. If I click Kathy's name and that ... I can opt Kathy back in. So it's pretty simple for the opt-out process and opting back in. But I also want to show you how you can download a CSV file of your pulse, some of your pulse reports. So let's go back to our Launchpad and take a look at one of our pulses. So we'll go into our social emotional wellness monthly survey. And you'll notice it takes me to the summary report page. So this report, this ... at the top right of your summary report, is only available to system admins to download either a raw response report or an aggregate report. And we keep that limited to system admins to protect the participant confidentiality. And we really defer to you at your district or your school site, whoever is the system admin, to use that with care, because we really don't want to violate participants' confidentiality. And we recommend that you really limit it, downloading raw responses to extenuating circumstances, such as when a student leaves a concerning comment, or they might be indicating self-harm or suicide, and you need to break that immediately. So you can do that and have access to the raw responses. You can also download your comments report. So if you have configured comments to be turned on for your Pulse, we can come to this comments page after the Pulse is closed, and you'll notice that same ... at the top right corner, and you'll see a download comments, which again, it will download it in a CSV file for you. Lastly, let me show you something new that we've recently added in our participation report. So if I click that purple skittle here at the top, I'm now at my participation page. When you click on the ... you'll see this participation by school appear. And this can be really helpful while you have a live Pulse that you're monitoring participation. But let's say that you're a very large district and you have a lot of schools that you're managing. So this is a nice way to be able to just filter down by school and to see if any schools are lagging behind and need some encouragement to participate or help increase their participation of students, staff, whatever type of Pulse that you've got set up. And you'll notice we give you the school name, how many participants for that Pulse, and then the number of respondents from the total of participants. And then we give you that percentage, the participation rate, in the very right-hand column here. So I know that we have covered a lot really quickly. There's probably a few more settings that we could have shown you, but we wanted to keep it to mostly the configurations of your settings page. So coming back to your settings here, these links here that you'll see, as well as managing notifications and user permissions. We hope that that is helpful when you think about who should have access to what custom groups you might want to add in that are not already being imported. And if you needed to add any admin users that are not being imported, that you now can easily do so. So I'm going to take us back into our presentation and share with you some resources. So we've got a list here. We'll share out this link as well for just this page, if that's easier for you to manage, as well as the PDF of our slide deck today. And we will be sharing out the recording after this webinar is over. You can also always visit help.kelvin.education for our full library of help documents and videos. And also, I'm going to actually, let me jump back to our Launchpad to show you, if you're not familiar with it, on the very bottom right-hand corner, you'll see this help icon. And if you click on that, you can search through and ask a question. So let's say I wanted to know something about participation. And now you'll see participation by school. It will bring up help documents that you can search through as well. Or you notice the ask at the very top here. If you wanted to send in a question, if you're not finding what you need from the help document in the Pulse site itself, you can send us a message and we'll get back to you. So now that we've kind of covered settings and permissions and we've shared that, I want to open it up to some questions in the chat. If we haven't been able to answer them as you've been asking, we'll go ahead and open that up to get them answered. So Justin and Ari, if you don't mind helping me, if there are any questions that we missed and didn't get answered.
There's a question there, Holly. It says, can you show how to see if a student asks to talk to someone or for help? How do counselors or teachers find out, and who sees this?
If a student asks to talk to someone or for help. Okay, yes, so that would be part of their custom group setup. Let me go back. Let me exit out of here. Come back to our Launchpad. Sorry, my controls are flipping screens on me, so I'm going to be moving stuff around here. So let me come back to our settings and show those permissions. So I'm coming back to the permissions link on the top row, and only the folks here in these groups. So if you are a system admin, or if you are someone in the request responders group or principals and school counselors, you would be able to see those student requests to speak to an adult. And we can look at the group. So let me just show you. Let me go to my request responders group. And we have a lot of custom groups here, so I'm going to sort through. And I have 3 in my group that have access. So only those 3 and system admins and a few others in our, permissions in our principals and school counselors would also receive that. So what we do once a student submits a request to speak to an adult is our system auto generates a notification to only the people in these groups that have been granted that permission. They'll receive a notification that you have a request waiting. Our email will give them a link. It will tell them how many students have requested assistance. They can click that link, which will take them into their Pulse site. When they come back to our Launchpad, it would take them in here into this request card. At the moment, we don't have any pending requests. And even our recently resolved requests was too long ago to show you, but it would show up just like our students card. And as that student shows up here, it would tell you what Pulse it was affiliated with, and then the adult could then reach out to that student directly on the site and come back and resolve that request and leave a comment. And I'll show you in our students one that we had resolved. So let me show you Diana. If the student had requested to speak to an adult, here I can reopen it and we'll come back. So now it would look like this with the dot showing you that you have a live request. And I see Diana Abbott has an open request, and I can come in and leave a comment. Met with Diana. She was having a rough day because her dog just died. And then I can resolve and comment. And now when I come back to my Launchpad, I'll see that the request doesn't have that red dot anymore. And if I went back to the student, I can see this flag pops up, recently resolved requests. I can see pending, recently resolved from this drop down here. And then we can sort through there. Hopefully that made a little bit more sense. System admin, are system admins able to change other system admin settings? For that question, are you asking if you can change the system admin settings for another system admin user?
I would assume so.
Yeah, so it would, any changes to a system admin setting would be applied to the whole group of system admins. So if I'm back on that permissions page and I made it so that system admins have limited access, that would apply to me as well as a system admin. So it's not individualized. But if you wanted to create a group, if you had some system admins that you did want to only have limited access to data, you could create a group of limited access and then put that custom group in there. But typically we keep the groups, or you would want to keep your system admin group pretty limited and small so that you don't have too many hands in the settings and changing permissions for other users.
Yeah, Holly, it looks like Jennifer clarified there too. So
I see.
The system admin who was maybe manually created, it's not, but still is there.
I see. Yes. Great question, Jennifer. So if I go back to users, and let's just say I have my system admin, let me just check my system admin. Okay, let's just say that Dave is not here as a system admin anymore. So I'm back in settings page. I'm going to click on manage users. I'm going to go ahead and just search for Dave. Here he is. And you'll see, because of that unlinked chain here, that tells me he is manually managed. And I want to go ahead and click on him I can just delete the system admin access for Dave, so uncheck it. I can also deactivate this user if Dave shouldn't have access anymore. So go ahead and come in because he's manually managed. I want to go ahead and manually deactivate him. A lot of users will be imported, but typically your system admins are manually managed. So if that's the case, you can go ahead and deactivate them and just remove their system admin access and hit save. And now we've updated that system admin user. So if I go back to my settings, I'll see Dave is no longer on my list here. Awesome. All right. Are there any questions that we missed, Justin and Ari, or that we need to cover from earlier?
I'm not seeing any in the chat, but yeah, we can continue to monitor to see if there's anything else kind of coming in. And then did we talk about those personal notifications down at the bottom there?
Yes, I mentioned at first when I was showing what happens when you come to the system admin page, but let's say as a system admin, I mentioned you might have your IT or data team as part of your system admins, and maybe they don't want to get the emails for when students request assistance to speak to an adult. So they could come in and uncheck that box so they don't receive those requests. And then it's still only going to the group of custom group of staff that you've selected to receive those requests. You can also uncheck these pulse email reminders or reports. Hopefully as a system admin, if you do uncheck that, then you have delegated that task to folks that you have owning the project of giving out those pulses so that they're aware there's a pulse happening or that a pulse has closed. So you can go in and update that there as well. One other thing I wanted to note, we will be recording this, so we'll have this put on our webinar page on our Kelvin Help Center. We'll be sending out the link to participants once the video has processed. But we also wanted to invite you to our future webinars coming up. We do have a good lineup of a couple more webinars as the spring closes out, excuse me. So I'm going to add this to the chat. That is the link to our webinars where you can register. Our next webinar in April is going to be with our guest speaker, Cheyenne Tatum, and she'll be covering an SEL roadmap. And then we'll also be doing a Kelvin how to lead a data walk or data, take your team through a data report after you've done a pulse. So if you are just started with Kelvin and just getting used to looking at the data, we're happy to take you through how you might walk through that data with your team. And thank you, Justin has also dropped our email, hello@kelvin.education. So if you are in need of support, that goes to our whole team. We usually get back to you within a business day. And we are around as well. Happy to jump on support Zoom calls with you if you just needed a quick walkthrough or wanted to have a consultation on some ideas for your next pulse or how you can expand your usage, then we'd be happy to help you with that as well. So you can reach out to us there at that email if you wanted to request that, and we can send you a link to book a time with us. Ari is our awesome SEL education lead over at Kelvin, and he's just amazing. We love working with him, with our customers, to figure out ways that we can make Pulse work better for you at your site and help your students and staff and families. So that's it. I got us through a little bit earlier than I expected. Usually I talk a little too much, so I'm happy to give you some time back today. I thank you all for your time to be here with us today. If you think of a question that we didn't get to today, or you've been kind of playing with the settings on your own and you're not sure about something, please do reach out, hello@kelvin.education. We can send you a follow-up. Go ahead and grab the link for the presentation that we've dropped in the chat, and also that resource that we've included. We look forward to working with you continually here at Kelvin. And if you have some ideas for webinars, more webinar topics that you'd like to see, please do let us know as well. We're always looking for ways that we can better support our Kelvin users and team. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.